Chris Noth. And I thank you so much for joining us. And he's in Sherman Oaks, California, I believe. And Jaki Baskow, she's in Vegas. And of course, she's my co-host on this. Chris, thanks a lot. Um, Chris, you grew up not that far away from me. And I know what those hills are like. They're kind of rugged in Stanford, I believe. So just tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up there and how it set you off on the path of becoming what you are.
Well, my whole family came from Madison, Wisconsin, and migrated east because that's where the work was, and in New York City. My dad became was a worked for Prudential Insurance, and my mom became a weather woman on TV. Started as a model back in Madison, and then she became a news reporter for CBS through the years that we lived there. So Stanford was a place at the time, North Stanford, where we were, up near Chimney Corners, was exceptionally rural, actually.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, our house was a had been a barn at the turn of the century, and they made it into a house. It was on Webb Hill Road. So when I was being sloppy at someone would say, "Hey, what did you grow up in a barn?" And I'd say, "Yeah, actually in the hayloft." Um, so we lived on Webb Hill Road, and across the street from our little cobblestone driveway that went up to the barn, across the street was a St. Bernard kennel with about 100 St. Bernards howling at the moon and yelping all the time. And then on the left was a little graveyard where all the Webbs were buried from the 17 and 1800s. So, and then our barn. So you can imagine as a little kid waiting at the bottom of the driveway for a Cub Scout meeting, there'd be the St. Bernard, and then to the left, I would look, and there are all the like ancient gravestones of the Webbs, Webb Hill Road. And then across the field was an actual haunted house with a wraparound porch and a cupola on top, very Southern Gothic. And the woman in like 1920 just got up and left everything there to just sit and mold and letters and lamps and grand pianos. And of course, we used to sneak in there, and there'd be their lives exposed. I mean, bed slippers under the bed, a huge Gothic mansion out of a Faulkner novel or something. So it was a very interesting way to grow up because Stanford hadn't become. You can't see any of it now. It's all been paved over, and it's a suburb now around it.
Even Webb Hill Road?
Well, Webb Hill Road is still there, but the woods and fields leading up are all gone. Our little, it was actually kind of a big house. The barn is still there, and around it now are all these homes that are, the typical kind of, upper middle class homes that they built because you were so close to the Merritt Parkway, which is 40 minutes into New York City. But when I was there as a child, it was really something for your imagination to get hold of. And I was very lucky in that way because it was village living in a sense. It was very much as if we were in southern Vermont. And then slowly, when people discovered how close it was to New York, it built up into a suburb without, I would say, a trace of any of the interesting rural elements that we had. I mean,
Well, let me
pheasants.
ask you, Chris, what in that world is there any glimmer of what your life was to become in that world, roaming the
None,
woods?
none,
Was there?
because um, it was, then you have to get into the fact that my father died young. My mother was a very famous news correspondent in New York, and which was I was uncomfortable with. She was actually kind of a celebrity in her own right at the time. And we were like kind of wild kids, okay? Um, and with our friends, there was a lot of freedom, a lot of hitchhiking, a lot of like hanging out with our friends, playing football and getting in trouble as we became teenagers, that is. And so, uh, you know, basically, as nature and the beauty of the place started to erode and the evolution of it became more suburban, there was more trouble in paradise for us kids.
So
Um,
nothing there during that period would have.
Nothing then, but I think it sowed the seeds for me being the kind of what they call actors as gypsies. What I would go for because I was very my uh it was fluid. I was getting in trouble, but I was also I had a mother who was very into academics and literature. So I needed direction because my father died at a very young age. So that sort of chaos pushed me forward later in life to find direction. Mostly in those days, it was about being with my friends, listen, marijuana came on into the scene, rock and roll came on into the scene. We'd sneak out on trains and go to New York ourselves, and come back. So there was a lot of things that were not palatable to my mother had she known, and she eventually did know, because I grew up as kind of a wild child. I mean, really, and
So I'm going to get into a little bit the next phase because again, what's really interesting and it is the whole purpose of the show is we're profiling corporate speakers, and Jaki, as you know,
and I just told you.
well, no, but hold on, I love it. He's not your corporate, typical corporate speaker, by the way,
Right.
because one thing I've already learned about you, Chris, you're not into telling people, into proselytizing and positioning yourself as a guru and whatnot. And so we're really talking about stories here. But remember this, uh, Jaki, when she's recommending people for the show, and I asked her why. Um, she said it's because people want to know, and Jaki, I'm going to turn it over to you. People want to know about people who've been through all the things you've done to get where you are,
Well,
because very few people
let
do.
me just note something there for you. As I said, I was kind of wild and impulsive and one of the things that stuck with me as an actor when I started out is the great teacher Sandy Meisner and Stella Adler, who I studied with both. And Sandy, when we in those beginning acting classes, said, "Listen, all those things that give you trouble in life, your temper, your impatience, your rage, your sadness, your lostness, that's all the stuff of acting. Terrible for your life, great for your acting. Don't lose that." Stella Adler used to say to the young ladies who would do it, she'd say, "Darling, darling, you can't be a lady and be an actress." The social norm, for the acting, all that raw stuff that gets you in trouble in life that you don't want and you're going into therapy to get rid of, that's the goal. That's the stuff you need for great acting.
So Jaki, go figure here. All the things, all your own evil problems, okay, that you're really trying to deal with during the day so you could be happily married and raise your kids okay, right? Those are the things that during your job, you've got to
Right.
bring out to the fore. So,
Try driving in LA. I meditate now and I'm on a real spiritual journey. But I know that I'm not there yet because when I get in the car in LA, I'm still going, "What the fuck?" Honking the horn. What's up? So I still
uh-oh.
react. And that's for Sandy's. Yeah, that's what we want. We want that on the stage. We want that on the screen, not like, let me breathe and just let it flow, which is better in life.
Well, for sure. So, Jaki, before we go back on to the next stage,
Yeah.
because really, I want to get to now how you stumbled out of the woods of northern Stamford into the lights, and there was a few things along the way. But Jaki, what made you, what made you say, "Hey, look, this is a man who can really share things with corporate audiences, and that we should bring onto this show."
Well, other than Chris being a household name, I happen to become friends with Chris through my friend Diane. And there's so much about Chris I thought would be an amazing speaker for him to share with corporate America. He multitasks being a father, a businessman, a celebrity, a dad, I mean, a husband. I mean, I would love him to talk to our audiences about how he takes everything and handles one thing at a time in life because it's so much. He's also an advocate for mental health and he's been involved with the rainforest and so much more. So he has a lot to talk about and a lot to share. And I just felt like he'd be a great speaker.
Well, you know, it's so funny because you've already got something really earth-shattering for me, Chris, and I mean this. I never thought of that before because again, I'm not in your profession. That here it is, you are paid to do and to basically live the things that they are also your demons. And I think that's something actually serious. We're
Or
gonna
to
move on, right?
use your demons and use your, it was a way of accepting yourself too, and finding an art form that would embrace that,
Yeah,
And
but how is it? And I don't want to get diverge on this because we might get back to it a little bit later. But you know, like I've got a temper, okay? I confess I've got a temper, okay? Now, if I were an actor and I were chosen for a role and I was spending 18 hours, you know, expressing that anger, now I have to go home and I have to put that away, okay? And
well,
that's something we all
probably by
deal with.
putting it out there, you have put it away to a certain extent. And
I hope.
and then you go back to it. That's where technique comes in, of course. And I don't believe in bringing the role home at all. It's that's a subtle thing, but the tools inside of you and acting technique and everything else, voice and speech and movement, all are to facilitate the life in you, you know. And Sandy, another thing Sandy used to say is what you do doesn't depend on you. It depends on the other person. So you are so locked in to get out, in one sense, to get out of yourself and to be freedom. To me, acting is all about freedom, impulses to let them flow freely like a river. And that's a lifelong journey. It's not like when I do a play or, oh, I did this play, now I've got it after all these years. No, you're climbing up the mountain again. You're at the bottom and climbing back up that mountain of material and character. Now,
And you have to do it even if you're not in the mood.
like everything in life, we're often in the mood, not in the mood sometimes to get out of bed, but you do. You do it.
Well, I'd rather be not in the mood to go and write an article than to not be in the mood to go and perform in front of
Yeah.
2,000 people who've just
Or
paid.
not only that, it's just going, I was doing Marlowe's Faust in New York at CSC, and you talk about mountains, and there were days where you're sitting backstage and you go, how am I going to do this journey? And then you have to let go of that thought. The mind is not always your friend, by the way, and you have to learn to let it go, take a breath, and go out there and experience it, moment by moment.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I want to get back to how you got into this whole gig, but I don't want to lose this. How do you do that?
Focusing on the other person, being in touch with your breath, never holding, and being responsive. Once you've got the text in a way that you know your own name, and I'm a firm believer to the repetition, to go through the boredom of the repetition of the lines where maybe you haven't got any of the emotional impact, but the work, building blocks. You're building a church is not just the top of the spire. It's the groundwork of the floor, and you've got to build it, build it, build it. So then you can have your freedom, and then you can work off the other fellow totally 100% unencumbered by your mind going, what? That's your enemy. What are you doing? You're behind the, what's that next line? You can't have that. Which is a little bit of a fear for me as I've gotten older, is keeping my memory in shape. There's still a few Shakespeare plays I want to do.
Let me just say something here
Easier to
because I don't want
memorize than most things.
well, because I want to get back to the journey, but I think really, Jackie, one of the things here we're really seeing in common, because Chris, one of the really cool things meeting, we're meeting a bunch of folks, and we're really focusing on what they've learned from life, right? Not just the cool stories that you hear on the front seat, on the front deck or something, right? And what we're hearing here is what you're telling us, if I'm understanding it correctly, Chris, what you're saying is that the way you get through this is to focus on the process. Focus on the process. Don't get caught up in this anything else. Don't get focused on what the critic is going to write
Don't
tomorrow.
get
Don't
caught up
focus.
in a result. Be in the moment with the person you're with. Totally. And now obviously it's different on stage, because if I'm in the moment with you and you're pissing me off and I want to respond that way because that's the goal. The other, but in the corporate world, it doesn't hurt to be 100% focused on the other person, so you can be out of your head and kind of have a real moment to moment conversation, depending on where that's going and what you're hoping to accomplish. Now on stage, it's to be completely free with while you're zeroed on them, so you're not in your head. That's for acting the biggest job, not to be in your head, to know the material so well that you're free to flow with it. And because every night on stage, we're not machines. It's going to be a little different, but the text is there to ground you. But then you're able to, like a skier, free form a little bit, and with the rigidity of the text, but the freedom to be in touch with what's inside you while you're locked into your partner, going moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And that's all that counts in that time. And it's very exhilarating, actually, once you're in that.
Well, because here's the thing. It seems to me there must have been some times at a very critical moment, in a live moment, some voice came into your head and just tried to blow everything up. That must have happened at some point.
Actually, I remember a matinee in Faustus, and it was actually, I remember going, what the hell is wrong with you? You get your shit together. You're not in it. Get in it. Get in, yeah, the voice in your head never is hard put to go into the background. But I'm learning more and more that although the mind is great for many, many things, fixing things and all that, and figuring out, analyzing things, it can also be your worst enemy.
Bruce, I'd like to say something, because
Please.
what I think that Chris tells people also is that we're all actors in our everyday life, especially in business. When you're selling or you're interacting with people, we have to have our best face on. And it's so important, because Chris also is a businessman. He has invested in a tequila company and the Cutting Room in New York and many other ventures. So, I mean,
Well, in those instances, for me, business is always about finding great people that you trust
yes.
around you, that have the same passion, but you implicitly trust. With the tequila, with my partner of almost 30 years, Steve Walter, at the Cutting Room, he's just a dear friend of mine. I would never question anything. It's a venue that has survived the onslaught, frankly, of New York City becoming
Yes.
much more corporate, really, than the small businesses that used to run it. But that to me is the most important thing in business. I mean, trust and a person that has the same passion for whatever that product is. Then I think you're golden.
Again, that's another common lesson. Let's get back to, because I don't want to lose, you've been very nice with your time, Chris. I want to get to this whole issue of how you stumbled into this incredible life, because it wasn't just a quick little hit.
Well, getting back to Webb Hill Road, where I was on the way to being a juvenile delinquent.
Yeah, how did you get out of that?
And I really was. We were just always in trouble, and borrowing, going to our girlfriend's house and borrowing the car of the people and getting caught and all kinds of stuff that was not good. My mom remarried and moved to Southern California for a brief amount of time when I was 14, and it was devastating to go from the East Coast, where all my friends, to Southern California, the antithesis of everything. And it just was like, I was so depressed. And Newport Beach, it was to me foreign, and it didn't fire any of the imaginative things that made my young life have value. Fortunately, through a series of events, which I won't go into, I don't think you're, of getting in trouble over there, my mother decided, you need to go to prep school or some private school back east to get your stuff together. You're
Hold
like,
on. And you went to Storm King?
no,
From
that was when we were on the East Coast. I went for half a
Okay,
year.
go ahead. I didn't,
got
because
caught
that would have
smoking.
been a shock.
I got
Newport
caught
King.
smoking in the bathroom, and she, my mother was always like, this happened, you're going here. This happened, you're going there. Now, in Southern California, it was just a mess in those days. You're talking 1970, 60, and rock and roll, drugs, all that stuff. So she wanted me to go to the school my brother went to, Mount Hermon. My older brother is a athlete, a scholar, and everything I wasn't. They interviewed me and they went, "We really love your brother, but Chris ain't gonna make it here, not with these grades. Sorry." But there is a school that I think would be more akin to where, and it was at that time one of the small coeducational art schools. There were a couple around Putney. Mine was called Barlow, Buxton. Small schools basing their education on a whole different philosophy. No grades. It was much more one-on-one and young. And that was the Barlow School. And that basically changed my life. My mother didn't, it was hard to get me there because as we went there, my mother saw the yearbook somehow and said, "Well, look at these kids with the long hair. This doesn't look like a serious school at all. Well, we'll go because we're here." As we pulled in a beautiful campus in Dutchess County farmlands, situated on a hill, another barn, which they turned into a library. I have a thing about barns. And then a pond. As we came in, we crossed the thing, and I looked to my left as my mother was looking to the right to go in to talk to the vice principal. I looked to my left, and there were about 6 girls skinny dipping in the pond. And I said, "Mom, I just have a really good feeling about this school." Then we got in, and luckily Kit Lake, who was a very fussy vice principal, took my mother on and said, "We take our education seriously here, Mrs. Noth. We don't screw around. We may be different and we may be co-educating." And won her over. I got to go to Barlow, and Barlow was an improvisation on education, which in a sense, very sophisticated young people, musicians, painters, artists, theater, teachers were all young. We called them by our first name in this beautiful setting of the farmlands. And it was a sort of a love affair. I just immediately felt like my life had been saved. And because also it wasn't cool to be in some kind of a juvenile delinquent. What was cool was, are you an artist? Are you a painter? Do you do music? Do you write poetry? Do you read? And of course, at the young age, we're all interested in girls, and those are the kinds of things that they were looking at. And you're like, oh. And so education came out of, like, for me, the education in the arts was a whole new thing. It was a revelation. And I grew from there to, reading the great books and writing. I started to write plays.
And what age was this? Like 15, 16?
14, 15, 16.
Oh.
Wow.
15, 16, 17. 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah. And it was still kind of experimental, because then when I went to Marlborough College, another small, gorgeous place in Vermont, it was much more rigorous. You started out with a class and you started with Homer, and at the end of the year, you read every great philosopher and writer up to Chaucer. So I was still learning it, trying to, and that became my focus. Actually, is like I wanted to know more. I just wanted to know more, and there was the opportunity in these places to say, look at what there is. Sometimes when I talk to young people and I go, what are you going to study in college? And they say media or publicity. And it's like, I don't think that's what college is about. I think it's about studying the great minds throughout the history of humanity and the sciences and everything else. So, and that's what these places afforded me. And I think it's helpful in acting also.
So where was it that you first got in the glimmer of your eye that you wanted to get on stage?
Marlborough College. We had a rep company in the summer that they let me in. I did that as a lark during the year to get out of Latin class.
Anything to do that.
And then I started to slowly build. And I remember I did a two-hander, Edward Albee's Zoo Story. And I rehearsed it with my partner for months without just us. And then we did it, and it was electric. And suddenly, I was scared to death going out there doing it, but suddenly the electricity of live theater infected me because the audience responds to it. And let's face it, Edward Albee writes good stuff. So if you get on that horse and you can ride it, it's going to deliver. And that was my first feeling of, I think this is just incredible. I can build on this. And then I started to study more, Stanislavski. I was convinced that I needed to find the great master teacher back then. And I wasn't going to find that in college. What we were doing was we were doing four plays in rep all summer and into the fall. So that was great. But there were directors and things, but there wasn't like the Stella Adler or the Sandy Meisner or the Lee Strasberg. And I was like, I need the secret. I need the key, because I would read about the group theater and all that. I need that. It wasn't about going off to Hollywood or anything like that. It's like, I'm not complete yet as an actor. I must find the master, And I did, when I went.
And did you need to find the master? Was that the key?
I felt I did. I just didn't feel that. I felt like I couldn't do it by myself, even though I basically did with that play. I felt, and this could be, what a lot of young people do or think. I think it's changed a lot, but in those days there were some messiahs of acting. There was Sandy Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse, Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, Udo Hagen at HB Studios, Stella Adler. These were all massively titanic personalities and teachers that came out of the group theater, one of the greatest ensembles of American theater, which came out of the teachings of Stanislavski in their way. Harold Clurman, you've probably heard these names.
Now, did you meet people at those? I'm interested how essential this was. What did you meet?
It was very essential. And it's funny because there's an evolution here. I got to college, and it opened up for me literature and the arts, but the technical aspects of acting weren't there. The institution was there with the theater, but the know-how, of what acting was a science to a certain extent. At least that's what I thought. And the more I read about these renowned teachers, the more I felt at that young age is I needed someone like that to show me the way, because I wasn't sure what I was doing. And that's why I went to the Neighborhood Playhouse. And Richard Pinter, my teacher, and then Meisner would come in, and I studied with Meisner also privately. They had a system, and that's what I felt I needed at that time. And the downside, I think, in those days, were that a lot of actors became enamored of the system instead of what the system was to give to you, which is to make you free. It's not about being a disciple of Strasberg or Stella. There used to be little wars, well, Stella Adler says this and Lee Strasberg says this and Meisner says you're all full of shit, you're in your head, and there were like these, opinions that don't mean anything. It's all about, does this free you up to be what we talked about earlier? And Meisner had a whole thing called the repetition game, which is a pretty famous technique to get you to go moment to moment. And he was the guy who said, what you do doesn't depend on you. It depends on what the other person is doing. So that's why your focus has to be 100% on the other person. Now, by the way, that can be very helpful in a corporate situation. When you feel with someone that you're the only person in the room with them, that they are so laser focused on you, that everything you say is landing and means something, that can only be good. And that's,
by the way, there's another wisdom here. Gosh, you're blowing my mind here, Chris, because what you're also saying, and first off, just this whole idea of being able to really focus on that other person and really listen to that other person. But the other thing you were saying about getting guidance from other people is that and this is really important in business, you can't let the system sets you free. If, like, we espouse what we call total quality management for people, right? Where you run your business to foster everybody's involvement. Well, if you rely on the system, you won't. So, Jackie, look at that. What he's
System is
basically
there to
telling you.
serve you, to free you, at least in acting. Not to say, here's my diploma from the system, but you're not getting anywhere. You know, it's not freeing you or whatever that would be in the corporate world. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's a Stella or a Lee Strasberg. I mean, Sandy used to say about Lee, he say he takes an actor that's in his head and brings him deeper in his head. Because for Sandy, it was all about get out of your head. You know, now Stella was completely different. She would when I took a script analysis, you had to go back and in the history of the character and find out every single detail of the time that they lived in, the social situation, how they would eat, how they would dress, how they would converse with their neighbor, all of that. Because let's face it, when you're doing Ibsen or Chekhov, it's not that's difficult because then some people get mannered. Do you know what I mean? You got to have it all, really. You have to have the what she's talking about, but then the moment to moment. It's dicey and difficult, but people do it all the time. There's great.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a few hundred of you. Yeah. So anyway, but now I'm going to get to this. Okay, you clearly had talent. You were able to get through.
Well, I was in New York and it was a struggle. I'm in New York.
That's what I want to get to.
The
You were
struggle was
not it
immense.
took
No.
15 years. Tell us about that.
The struggle in New York in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s was just immense. There wasn't what there, now there are, God, to my mind, so many opportunities, so many good actors and actresses also. But in there, you had 3 or 4 soap operas, you had off Broadway, and Broadway. And occasionally a Hollywood movie would come in starring Bill Hurt or someone, or not much TV, hardly any TV series. So it was slim pickings. Your idea was, I'm going to get in the theater, I'm going to work my way, and finally, once I earn my stripes doing plays and things, I'll find my way to the West Coast, or an agent will see me and have something 3,000 miles away or whatever. But also New York in those days, you could live as a young actor. I lived in a maid's room for $88 a month, West Side on 101st Street.
Well, I can only imagine.
With 2 other guys, and it was one of those big things. But I'd ride my bike. That's how I got around, riding my 10-speed to and fro till it got stolen. You could find a way to live in Manhattan then as you struggled with your career, and it was slim pickings. My first off-Broadway play was at a place called Circle Rep, which is a restaurant now, but it was a big off-Broadway theater. Marshall Mason ran it. Lanford Wilson was the playwright in residence, and it fostered a lot of actors like Bill Hurt and a bunch of them, and a bunch of theater actors. And I did a play there. I got my equity card, and I made $150 a week, which was the difference between a cheeseburger and a hamburger.
And what are we
But
talking about? The 80s?
But it wasn't enough for me, because in all my readings, I was reading the life of some of the great British actors, Olivier Gielgud, Ralph Richardson. And I wanted that, part of the education I got at Marlborough and everyone else, I wanted the bigger canvases. I didn't want to be a soap actor, and I didn't really watch TV. I wanted the kind of life that I read about with them. And where am I going to get that? I'm not getting that in New York, doing off Broadway and an under 5 on a soap opera, and doing yet another acting class and doing it, acting exercises. I want to be the guy that's going to be doing Chekhov and Shakespeare and rep or whatever. Now, it came to a head. A lot of things come out of a painful situation. My girlfriend at the time was sick of being with a broke actor and dropped me. And I was just, after 3 or 4 years of just struggling in New York, getting practically stomach ulcers from my diet, eating in diners, not living, but eating in them. I came, after she broke up with me, to a point of, I'm either going to have a nervous breakdown or I have to go to California. I have to do something. I've hit bottom. And it was either, also Chicago was a big theater scene, but I knew also of Yale Repertory Drama School, Yale Drama. If you go to Yale, drama, which is a graduate program.
Yeah.
Whole emphasis is on doing plays because it's not just actors, but it's directors, stagehands, playwrights all together. So it's new plays and the Yale rep you'd be doing. But get in was really hard. And I took a shot and be out of like, I've got to change this. It's just not enough going to acting. I've got to hitch myself so that I'm actually doing plays and the kind of plays that mean something to me. And I got in, and that was a game changer. Because by the second year at Yale, which because it had such a great reputation, like Juilliard does and Yale drama did, I had an agent who came up and saw the play because we were doing plays. The first play I did was Gorky's The Lower Depths, just a profound, great play. And I played the part of the actor who dies of influenza during the whole thing. It's a beautiful Gorky play. You don't see it too often. And that's the thing, the beautiful thing about you're doing plays that they're not commercial at all. They're just great pieces of literature and fantastic ensemble pieces. And that I seem to have done well in institutions. I thought maybe
At least not penal institutions.
And that was a game changer for me. Because at that time you had to have an agent. You just did.
So you started getting parts in New York. So, and again, you've been so generous with your time. And again, this isn't all about the stories, but how did you end up stumbling into what I guess really made you world known?
Well, Law and Order was my first. I was doing regional theater. I did Hamlet in Stratford. Zoe Caldwell directed me in 1988. And then Lynn Kressel, who's a pretty famous casting director, a big casting director, had this kind of show that my agent said, I want you to go in on this called Law and Order. And I was like, what the hell is this? And she said, listen, this show is going to go. So I was a terrible auditioner, by the way. I didn't understand the science of auditioning. I thought you just had to be always impulsive, but no, auditioning is really tough. You got to know it like you've been on a Broadway stage for 6 months. You got to know the material that well to be, you know what I mean? To be able to, because they were seeing so many people. She said to me, don't do your normal, fly by night audition. Because this one, I think you're right for, and I think you could get it, but you got to. And so I said, oh, geez, okay. So I got through the first step, and then they had to fly out to LA, and they went to what they call the Black Tower of Universal, and Dick Wolf was there. And it was between me and Michael Madsen, actually, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And something about that part clicked for me, and they thought I'd be a good opposition to George Zunza, who was my first partner. People forget in Law and Order that when we first started for the first 2 to 3 years, it was all guys. And I had about 3 partners before I had Jerry Orbach, 2 partners, George Zunza and Paul Servino. And then Jerry.
Hold on, I want to go back to something because I'm focused on the lessons and not all these famous guys.
Yeah.
So what you're really telling us that what got you that part was, again, process.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't just go in and give your usual shtick.
Right.
She
was on to me.
Pardon?
I hated auditioning. I just felt it was, and she was on to me, and she said, this is real, and it could be yours if you apply yourself to actually not treating it like some audition, but as a real act it, study it, do it, And
so you really became that part, so that when they saw you
sense of that
audition
part from the beginning, and so that break was big because there wasn't much TV in New York in those times. That was one of had been other shows that came and went, but that was a big step for New York City, which afterwards had a lot of shows in it because the Law and Order showed them it could be done, and those years were really great.
So let me ask you this: when did you first find out that you were a celebrity?
Well,
when did it first become apparent to you?
I could say Law and Order, but I have to admit, it was really after I'd shot Sex and the City on HBO, And HBO back in 99 was not the HBO of today. And when we did a season, they would show it, but then they would repeat it. So it was, and I remember I was outside in New York with a friend of mine on an outdoor patio in a restaurant, and we were talking, and I heard this commotion, this like these girls going, wait, is that Mr. Big? Like screaming it. And like all of a sudden I see that they were coming at me. And I was like, what? Because they had seen the show. And for some reason that part resonates with.
But wait a minute, Law and Order? Come on, that was, well, you're
Yeah,
saying you
but
could go to
Law
New
and Order,
York restaurants and
no, I would, yeah, there was, but not like this. This was different. Law and Order, I get like cops would come up to me or firemen or people on the subway, which I always took.
Hmm.
This was something different. This was a bit of a hysteria. I actually had to say, please stop, get out, don't keep it down. It was like for that instant, I felt, like a beetle or something with that particular little crowd. And then it just incrementally grew and grew. And it's become a bit of a circus over the years with everything that's involved with it. But that, in terms of, all the celebrity news stuff and the focus and the fascination of that show, of which I was a part of, which again, like I said, part of me thinks it was just luck that I got that. As I just explained to you who I am, it's very far removed from this character of Mr. Big.
Chris, I have to say something. They're rerunning it every single night. I watch it every
Yeah.
night before I go
I
to
mean, I'm
bed.
starting to get the same stuff. People are coming up to me and I'm going, don't you watch Law and Order?
They love you. I can't help it. Everybody loves you.
Or
The
they
men, the
either love
women,
me or
everybody.
they either love me or love to hate me.
I talked to one of my actors today, Sven, and he said, and he just moved here from Austria, and he goes, my girlfriend and I watch Sex the City every night. He goes, and now I know a lot about women and men.
But by the way, though, Chris, it would seem to me, and again, we've got to watch the clock here. Again, just looking at the human side of this doesn't sound as great as everybody thinks it might want to be. Okay.
Let
I
me
mean,
say
is
this.
it really fun to go out to a restaurant?
No. It's fun to get bumped up to first class sometimes. That's fun, or to be able to get a table. That's not bad. I used to really not like it. I'd be at a table and I'd see somebody recording my conversation and I'd have to stop them. Or a lot of stuff comes with it that I find repulsive between you and me and the audience. Because I find the whole tabloid worlds, I call it tabloid pornography. And it also, I think it hurt the show. I mean, I've count myself very lucky not to be in the new show, because I just don't want to be a part of the circus. And that's what it became. And also people start to think that's who you are and label you that way. It's weird. It's very, very weird.
I
And
was just going to say,
I'm not even on a level of some of these actors who are, every week on, their private lives are up for airing. So, getting off that particular train was good, but as you say, now it's always playing. It's just that I never realized that particular part would have some kind of I don't know what that it would resonate the way that it did, because I
well, and
always.
think about the irony, Jackie. The guy, who thinks he's just a regular guy, right? He's proud of his accomplishments, but he grew up in the suburbs like I did, and now all of a sudden he's a sex symbol, right?
Look,
And
my idea of an actor is I wanted to be the next Olivier. Now
yeah,
that
and now you're a sex
laugh at
symbol.
that because I'm far away from that, but at least striving toward that. I still am. That's why I
And
still.
you're a great actor and you're a great person and a great
But
businessman. And you know what? I think that what I loved about Sex and the City was everybody was rooting for you. They wanted you to be with Carrie.
not everybody, but and by the way, I'm very good friends with John Corbett, which is fun when we go out to have a dinner or a drink to see the reaction there. I
Well,
have to
listen
say,
again, we got to run. We're running out of time.
I got
Thank
more
you.
stories for you.
Oh, we're all, hey, listen, I could go and get a drink. I can pull up a nice tequila right now, but
Make sure it's amber.
yeah, well, listen, I'm not too far from the cutting room, nearer than you are. But anyway, wrapping up, I want to get to two other lessons here because this is really something that I think is important. How do you deal with the fact, and how do you learn to deal with the fact that people have a totally wrong impression of you, that they would, and that they, and that, or and also that they flatter you, that they treat you differently? I mean, how do you stop that from going to your head? How do you stop? No, wait a minute, I'm
I
just a
have
regular
learned
guy who
this.
acts.
I have learned this. And I used to bristle a lot sometimes at the way people would infringe on the privacy. Having been through the last few years, I have learned to actually embrace it. That people it's their way of being nice, and you know what, if you think about it, you have to be grateful that you've done something that people like that much, instead of being like, oh yeah, I don't like you. It's like, yeah, I got to be grateful that I've impacted somebody. Now if someone's being nasty or says rumors about you, or you get bit by a snake, you're not going to bite the snake back, you know, that's what snakes do. They bite you, or, you can't let, and it's a process. It's like I say, I know that I'm not there because I know when I'm in traffic in LA, I still get mad sometimes. So that's a moment to moment life lesson that I'll be, doing the rest of my life probably. But having kids also has impacted me in a way to be more open to like, I find it really when I see someone that I don't even know, like I'm getting a parking space and someone's getting out for me, and to look at them and smile and say thank you. I don't know, somehow the little human interactions now have become very important to me for people that I don't even know. And obviously the people you do know, and your friends, because here's one life lesson I have learned. Not everybody's going to stand out in the rain with you if they can run and be dry, but those that do will be with you the rest of your life. And that's important to know.
Yep.
Well, what a beautiful way to end this. So,
This
Chris,
has been
again,
fun. When can we do it again?
well, there is, again, since you've been general, I'm going to ask you one more question because I think this is also really important. And you brought up this issue, we all have, I have my temper, I've got my different issues, but I'm not paid like you are to actually to fire
Thank
them
you.
up. Is being paid to fire them up in some way a way, and you kind of, I want to leave with this. Is that in a way to help almost compartmentalize them and control them? So maybe with your son, you're less angry than you might have been? Or is it a struggle sometimes to put that demon? No, I was paid all day to be angry. Now I got to go home and be a sweetheart to my son who's crying
No,
right
that's not hard for me. If I'm maybe in a movie and I've yet to get a part where after you immerse yourself so deeply that, and you'll read a lot about actors who they need to be called the character's name, and they go they bring it home with them because they feel they have to in order to be truthful, and I admire that. I don't do that, but it might depend on the part, but with the theater especially, once you've had that 2 hours on stage, you can go home and relax. And no, I don't, it doesn't, if I do Zeus story on stage, I've exhumed it. I've exhaled it. I've exercised it. And then I got to get up and do it. The hard part is getting up and going back and doing it. But I
now. I don't
don't,
even know how you do it.
yeah,
It's
I don't
beyond
sometimes
me.
either.
Well, Chris, we could do this all day. Maybe one day I'll see you in the cutting room.
You
And you
absolutely have to
folks.
come to the cutting room. We have great music there all the time. We've survived the pandemic. We're still happening. I've done readings of plays there. I'll let you know when I do that.
I'd
And you can
love to
see
hear
some of
about
the
it.
oldie but
Meet that
goodies.
incredible son of yours,
Yes, you
but he's
will.
not old enough for the cutting room.
Well, Orion is old enough to go. Well, my little one does come in. He loves to play drums, so we bring him in early. I'll call you the next time I'm there.
I'd love to meet you, Chris. And Jackie, thanks for arranging this. And by the way,
Thank you,
when
Bruce.
when you started the show, Chris, you said, "Look, I'm not here to share a lot of lessons, and you shared a lot of lessons.
Okay, well, I'm glad. I hope that it
You
brought something
did.
to somebody. Thanks. It's great
Thanks a
talking.
lot.
You got
Chris,
it.
we'll have to get Diana. You guys have to come
Yeah,
to Vegas with
let's
your
do a
son.
talk, you, me and Diane. We
I
gotta
would
get.
love that. I would love that.
All
All
right,
right. Well,
guys.
we're